All right, here we go again. This is Larry with Contact Report 66. Now, the corrections and improvements were made by Catherine Mossman and Joseph Darmanin. Thanks, guys. And the contact person is Semjase. You know who the translator was. Okay, this is the 66th contact, Wednesday, November 10, 1976, at 14:18 hours, 10 November 1976. That's the Marine Corps birthday, Marine Corps' 200th birthday for the U.S. Marines. At 2:18 in the afternoon. Anyway, just a little side note there. Billy, first of all, I have to bring you this huge package with giant greetings. Semjase, what? What does it contain? Billy, you will have to find that out for yourself. It is a gift from Herbert, for whom I bring it to you with very dear greetings. Semjase, you know that I should not take any gifts. Billy, it is something completely different, and it is not a gift, but a present. Semjase, is there a difference? Billy, certainly, because a gift is like a donation, while a present corresponds to the desirous feelings of love or joy, because in love and joy you want to give someone love and joy again. Semjase, you express this wonderfully, but it does not correspond to the ideas of the earth humans, as I know. It might only be your and a few like-minded ones' values of observation. Billy, possible. I know that humans generally only give gifts because they feel obliged to do so. You know, mostly only in mutual exchange. Semjase, I know that. I know the difference between a gift and a present, but I feel the need to hear your opinion about it. Billy, oh, you thus made a small test. That is a good thing. You know, the last weeks I had a lot to explain to Martin and Mara, especially regarding the evaluation of different word terms. As you know, I break down the word terms into their special and appropriate values, which is why misunderstanding constantly occurs in communication. I can only always find the real value for myself in one word, which is then not understood by the others, because then we talk past each other, as it were, because humans are still completely unaccustomed to thinking in the real word value and the real sense of the word. Semjase, this may bring you bad misunderstandings, but the humans of the earth will learn from it, at least for the time being, those who maintain contacts with you. Billy, that may be, but it always needs long explanations. Semjase, that will be so, but as you know, you are very patient in explaining. But let me now please see the contents of the package. ... Billy, here, you can open it yourself. That is your job, because it is for you. Semjase, thank you. In parentheses, Semjase is busy opening the package. In parentheses. Semjase, oh, what is this? How pleasant this is. So fine. ... Ah, that is very sweet. How fine it is, and how warm. Many, many thanks. ... I am happy to keep it. Yeah. I am so happy. Billy, of course you should keep it. It is for you. You do not have to ask me if you can keep it. Semjase, I am a bit confused. It brings Herbert. Bring Herbert my grateful love. I am so happy. He is very sweet. I notice that you are confused, but for sheer joy, it seems to me. So Herbert hit exactly the right thing. That makes me happy for you and him. Where you want to put this fuzzy bear? Do you not have anythings like this? Anythings of this kind yourself? So Herbert gave her a teddy bear. Let me read that again. I noticed that. You are confused, but for sheer joy, it seems to me. So Herbert hit exactly the right thing. That makes me happy for you and him. Where do you want to put this fuzzy bear? Do you not have any things of this kind yourself? Semjase, he shall remain here in the ship as a constant reminder of the solidarity and the certainty that we also have love and good friends on the earth. Billy, okay, And what about my second question? Semjase, oh yes, no, we do not have things like that. Billy, that is unfortunate, but let us talk about something else. I have some questions. You know, we have certain symbols for our sun, I mean the soul, and for all planets, right? Semjase, sure. Billy, okay, can you tell me how or where they came from? Semjase, sure. The symbols were already coined about 12,000 years ago by our ancestors. However, they were changed several times in the course of time and were even lost. Again and again, however, they were found and then reincorporated into their original form. So they have been preserved until today. So they also exist again in their original form. Each individual symbol contains very particular and special values which are peculiar to the planet in question, but which are also transmitted to all forms of life in terms of vibration, according to which they align themselves in their characters and exhibit corresponding characteristics which are expressed in the physical, psychical, and consciousness-based realms. Psychical. Anyway, okay. Billy, aha. So these are already the astrological aspects, are they not? Semjase, sure. But all planets, as well as the sole star and the galaxy central sun, are important in this respect, whereby time plays a very dominant role. In the exact astrological determination value, the determination of time up to the second value is of enormous importance. The factor which is unfortunately not considered by the Earth astrologers, because they only want to calculate their evaluations according to minutes, which inevitably leads to inaccurate or only approximately correct results. Billy, you mean that the horoscopes are not very accurate? Semjase, sure. Only in isolated cases are they very accurate, namely when the number of seconds is combined with a full minute number. Billy, then how is it with human beings? For example, what has to be considered as birth time? Semjase, the exit of the skull of the newborn. So they're saying that's the birth, when the skull exits. I'm assuming when okay. Billy, this means that the time of birth is not the moment when the newborn human being has already left the womb completely, but the moment when the newborn person, as you say, presses his or her skull cap through the cervix and is practically confronted with the outside world. Semjase, sure. Billy, but why is that? That the human is not born yet because the birth process is still taking place. Semjase, you do not consider that the importance of the process lies in the fact that as soon as the skull of the newborn is exposed to the environment, its influences become noticeable in concentrated form and penetrate through the skull of the newborn. This can actually only happen with the moment of the release of the skull or the skull cap, because still embedded in the womb, a natural protective belt prevents this process, whereby the nascent human being is able to develop his or her basic characteristic or character in the womb in peace and quiet, which is already tuned to his or her time of birth. The external influences of fully effective radiations and vibrations complete the whole thing and round it off. Billy, I find that ingenious. Therefore, many birth time data might not be correct thereby. Semjase, sure, but do not worry. Yours is of correctness. It was Svath's concern at that time that the right moment was captured. And here we go again. Svath is Semjase's grandfather, Ptah's father. Okay. Billy, you mean 1100 hours is exactly right? Semjase, sure. Billy, okay, it is not that important. Semjase, it is, in fact, of enormous importance for you. Billy, that does not interest me very much. What seems more important to me is the question whether you also have a certain symbol for Era and that you draw it. Semjase, sure, we have a symbol for Era. Era's being the homeworld, Semjase's homeworld, ERRA. Like for all other planets and the stars. I will record it for you. Do you have a pencil there and a paper? Billy, of course, just a moment. Here, is that enough? Semjase, sure, now look here. So, you see, dash, dash, dash. So, this is the symbol for Era. Take that with you and transfer it to the contact report later. Billy, I will. But tell me, I find this sign quite strange. It has so much in common with those symbol signs we have for our planets and the sun. How is that possible? And above all, what does this sign mean? Semjase, I already explained to you that your planetary and celestial symbols trace back to our ancestors, who made them according to the vibration and the radiation values of the individual planets and the relevant celestial bodies. We got to remember that our ancestors and her ancestors are the same people. Okay, I'll read that again. I already explained to you that your planetary and celestial symbols trace back to our ancestors, who made them according to the vibration and radiation values of the individual planets and the relevant celestial bodies. In other words, this means that the signs were made according to the individual celestial and planetary state of evolution, so that each individual sign records the state of evolution or the level of evolution of the respective celestial body and planet. This is also true for Era, my home planet, whose signs are composed of various ancient symbols of our ancestors, i.e., the same signs that were used for the stars, the galaxy, central sun, and your sun, as well as for the planets of the solar system, and are now common again with you, except for the symbol of the galactic central sun. The lying form of our symbol now represents the middle between above and below, the balanced. Compare, therefore, the symbols of the sun and the planets of the solar system, because that which is equalized does not come to the fore, but always the dominating in the negative or in the positive. Billy, I understand to some extent, because Martin Sorge has explained a lot about it to me. Semjase, he will also be able to explain to you the meaning of the symbol, which you should then also classify as written form in our reports, for information and knowledge for all. Billy, okay, I will ask him. Semjase, a detailed explanation of the individual symbol parts would be important. Please ask him about it. In his field, he is unusually thorough and knowledgeable, which makes him stand out very pleasantly from the usual mass of astrologers, which you have surely noticed. Billy, certainly, Semjase, you shall not talk about it. I know the circumstances, your correctedness, and the effects you have had. They have been preordained in such a manner for a long time, so have the things to come. Billy, you are very mysterious. Why did you never tell me anything about it? Semjase, you should not know certain things beforehand, not even these. If you knew them prematurely, your emotional world would suffer. You would prepare yourself for it as usual, but in this case, this should not be the case. Billy, all right, I do not want to know. Semjase, that is good. Your dreams are your medicine. Billy, oh, girl, this looks so familiar to me. I just wrote this recently. Semjase, it is familiar to me, and I enjoyed it. And then there's a note in here about the planetary symbol of Era. Explanations on the Semjase report. This is by Martin. If I correspond here to Semjase's wish to analyze the planetary symbol below, it is as if I had to explore an unknown country. Such a symbol says so much about the Wesson and level of development of a celestial body. But what do we Earth human beings really know about the planet Era? About its position in the Taygete system? The symbol stands before us as a mysterious message, completely encoded, also giving only hints to those who know, like faint light signals from a distant lighthouse. And yet all our longing is directed toward this beacon from a world in the depths of space, because human beings also live there. Human beings who could perhaps first teach us how to be human beings. So what can the symbol tell us about their world? And there's a picture here of the symbol that Semjase drew about Erras. This is a symbol for Erras. And it looks like a banana. No insults intended, but it looks like a banana on the left. And it looks like maybe an eye in the middle, a circular eye, and a TV antenna on the right. Anyway, it's on, if you want to see it, it's www.futureofmankind.co.uk/Billy_Meyer/contact_report_66. And it's down in the middle of the contact report. Like I said, it kind of looks like a banana turned away from an eye with a TV antenna coming out the other side. Its individual parts resemble the planetary symbols of our solar system, proof that these symbols go back to common ancestors, to a primordial knowledge. Nevertheless, the derivation of our celestial symbols cannot simply be transferred to the Taygete system. So I have to proceed step by step. Semjase may ultimately decide how far the interpretation experiment has succeeded. In order not to go too far in the explanations, I refer to my essay in the December 1976 issue of Aquarius Time on astrological symbolism, pages 7 to 15. The planetary symbols of the solar system described there are almost all arranged vertically, one above the other. This means that in each case, one area dominates and another is dominated by it, i.e., there is a state of tension between above and below. Only one symbol makes an exception to this, namely that of Jupiter. It is true that here too, the left part, in parentheses, the soul, end parentheses, is somewhat elevated in relation to the substance. But Jupiter is, for us, the clearest principle of natural order, lawfulness, and harmonious balance. He is considered the most fortunate, in quotes, star of our system. The human being, born under his sign, is most capable of following the laws of creation, if the correct attitude towards them is attained. Okay. And I'll get this last part again. He is considered, speaking about Jupiter, he is considered the most fortunate, in parentheses, star of our system, being the solar system. And the Pleiadians call a star anything with something rotating around it. So Jupiter has moons, so they call it a star of our system. The human being, born under his sign, is most capable of following the laws of creation, if the correct attitude towards them is attained. In addition to this, Erras symbol would have to represent even more clearly the balance resting in itself, the equality, in quotes, of the different planes, and thus the practically perfect realization of the idea of creation in consciousness. For here all parts are arranged next to each other and connected in unity. So much for the position of the whole symbol. Now to the meaning of the individual parts. He's saying because this symbol is laying down that everything is balanced and equalized. Okay, well, I'll read that again. In analogy to this, Erras symbol would have to represent even more clearly the balance resting in itself, the, quote, equality of the different planes, and thus the practically perfect realization of the idea of creation in consciousness. For here, all parts are arranged next to each other and connected in unity. So much for the position of the whole symbol. Now to the meaning of the individual parts. In the middle is the spirit symbol, corresponding exactly to the sign for our sun. On Era, the orientation towards a cosmic center means for the individual the actual purpose of life around which everything else is aligned. However, it is difficult to put into words what this central idea is like. Perhaps it is purely abstract, somehow energetic, by no means to be understood in the sense of an earthly concept of God. In parentheses, spirit as a divine spark in human beings. End parentheses. Rather, in the form of the physical field concept in which the nuclear forces can be thought of at the center, and the orbiting energy at the periphery. The emptiness in between the center and the orbit, however, creates the wesen of the spirit as the all-unifying force. This may be how the common ancestors of the Errans and Terrans found the spirit symbol. In the Era symbol, this spirit now connects the spiritual and material realms with each other in equal harmony. The left side of the symbol appears as a moon-shaped structure. That's what I call the banana. Not being disrespectful, but the left side of the symbol appears as a moon-shaped structure, but different from the soul symbol on Earth. In a sense, there is an intensification through the doubling. The Errans probably have older souls than we do, which have more than just a recording and registering function. They can probably create something themselves from the absorbed forces, or they are able to regenerate soul energies. Some of the absorbed forces or impressions are probably used to control life processes. This could explain, for example, the much older age of the inhabitants of Era. We already find hints of this in certain Earth human beings who are able to maintain a youthful appearance thanks to their spiritual receptivity and readiness. At the same time, the repetition of this left part of the symbol is reminiscent of a swinging wave. In other words, closed parents, closed parents, closed parents, which on Era would make the term soul essentially different from ours. It should be remembered that today's concept of soul on Earth is shaped by the Christian religions, that there is no such thing as an immortal soul in this sense, but that spirit and soul are quite illogically linked together. Soul in the Era symbol, on the other hand, means the concave mirror that absorbs sensations and radiations, focuses them, and throws them back or processes them within itself. The right-hand part of the Era symbol, finally, is probably able to convey the most interesting insights for us Earth dwellers. We find a similar part of the symbol in a rarer spelling for Uranus, namely. It is supposed to mean the H, the first letter of the discoverer of Uranus, the astronomer Herschel. However, this explanation does not lead us any further. We would then have to ask ourselves again why this H was combined with the Uranus symbol in this manner. It is likely that the similarity to the spelling of Era played an unconscious role in this. In any case, here we can see the connection of the symbol for the material form, which is a cross, with the dipole, in quotes. And now our journey of discovery, a dipole. Dipole's an antenna, or antennas are dipoles, whatever, a lot of them. Anyway, that's kind of why I saw an antenna there, I guess. Okay, and now our, quotes, journey of discovery becomes breathtaking. Up to this point, the scientifically trained mind could still follow and explain. Now something else takes over. A dipole is not only the well-known antenna shape, but also the switching element in electron computers that says yes or no, 1 or 0, plus or minus, or the north and south magnetic polarity of the particles in iron or any plus or minus part in a force field. Digital. And now this in connection with matter, which is so compact for us, how does it suddenly become changeable, transparent? How sovereignly the Errans must master not only the destruction of matter into energy, but also the reversal of this process. They must be able to build up force fields from dipoles, gravity fields, for us, in parentheses, for us inseparably connected with matter, and parentheses, must be able to be neutralized. Thought images are created, light is subjugated, it is surpassed, ... What a world opens up in this sign. How colorful the space suddenly becomes, flooded with force fields. Light begins to write, not only as we do on the fluorescent screen, but in free space. And time, linearly and irreversibly connected with our matter imagination, becomes a continuum that can be roamed in all directions. ... Okay, we're floating 2 feet above my head, but we'll keep going. It might make sense someday. Let us conclude and return to our earth. First, we had the crosses on the churches. Today our roofs are adorned with the dipoles of antennas. Will we succeed in combining these two, seen as symbols, so that we arrive at a new concept of matter? A concept that takes less account of density and more of the transparency of mass. Surely the path leads via the language of symbols, the tireless light signs of truth that the distant lighthouse is trying to send us. ... Will we then also write the planetary symbols of our solar system in horizontal form one day? Billy, you were listening. Semjase, sure, you do not control your block. Your dreams are wonderful. I feel deep joy for you. Semjase, thank you, but is it really just joy? Semjase, sure, it is definitely like that. You made the feelings of joy and happiness ring out in me. Billy, then I rejoice with you. Thank you very much, dear girl, in 2 forms. Semjase, you think and speak in similarity. Billy, how could I be different? The main thing is that it is understood. Semjase, certainly. Billy, well, thank you very much, but now I have some other questions. Do you have enough time? Semjase, today, yes, but I still have important things to tell you. Billy, I expected that, but can I ask my questions first? Semjase, just ask. I am not in a hurry. Billy, that is really good, because your answers could take a long time. Look here. These are 2 pages of questions from Mara and Martin. I will read them to you if you agree. Semjase, sure. Billy, good. Thoughts about the emotional life of the Pleiadians. Martin and Mara talked to me about this topic on the evening of the 26th of October, 76. Semjase and the Pleiadians are human beings like us, and so they also have feeling impulsations like love, friendship, sympathies, and antipathies. But since they are more than 3,500 years ahead of the Earth's inhabitants in their development, we wondered how this might have affected the manner in which they feel. Had fine feeling life been developed to the same extent as the spiritual life, science, and technology? And is it perhaps that with this development, the intensity of the feelings diminished? That love and the desire to be together with certain other Wesen are less pronounced and are replaced by knowledge and intellect? Perhaps it is also the case that although the strength of these feelings has been preserved, these powers cause different physical and psychical reactions than in today's terrestrial human beings. But perhaps there are also peoples or races among the inhabitants of Erra that are more passionate and emotional, and others that appear cooler and more unemotional. Similarly as on Earth, e.g., the cool Englishman in contrast to the passionate Southerner, etc. Perhaps also certain tasks cause a change of the emotional sphere. Does Semjase correspond to the average of the inhabitants of Erra in her kind of emotional impulses, or whether her activity as a beamship pilot and teacher of the creational teaching requires a repression or a special reshaping of feelings? It could also be, however, that the difference between Pleiadians and Earthlings in the emotional sphere is much smaller than in the standard of living, consciously or technologically. It would perhaps be desirable, in addition to emphasizing the great difference in development between Erra and Terra inhabitants, to highlight possible parallels, if any. This would give us a human understanding of the extraterrestrials. The danger to regard them as divine beings or as conquerors or future rulers of the earth would be less. The ground would be removed from the religious sensationalism around the extraterrestrials, but perhaps this would also reduce the effectiveness of the task, e.g., Semjase's task. Finally, an important consideration: on Earth, understanding and technology have developed tremendously in the last 4,000 years. At the same time, psyche and emotional life have more or less remained at the same point. Perhaps the ability to love has even lost sensitivity and expressiveness. Does this side of the human being need a much longer period of development? Or is this tendency perhaps only typical for the Earth, whose cosmic symbol, in quotes, or in parentheses, looks like upside down symbol for female, places the material, the plus, above the spirit, 0. Then it could possibly be different in other cosmic systems, in parentheses, Teget. Also with the development of the emotional life. The predominance of material things on Earth manifests itself, among other things, in the emotional life, also in the form of jealousy and possessive thinking. One believes to have the beloved person exclusively for oneself. One tries to chain them to oneself and to be secure with him. Certainly the reduction of such jealousy and the gradual, complete liberation from it is an indication for the psychical and emotional development of a person. So jealousy should perhaps already be largely unknown to the people of Erra. And finally, a direct question: does the overcoming or mastery of gravity, the anti-gravity of the beamships, etc., presuppose that one has at the same time freed oneself from such effects of gravity in one's consciousness-based or emotional-based development? That one can only work physically with these forces when one has reached the inner stage of development in the aforementioned sense? These, dear girl, are the questions. Can you give me an answer? And look here, there are 2 short questions. One of them you already answered earlier with the Erra symbol, while you can still answer the other one in private. Semjase: sure, I understand. We will talk about it later. To the best of my knowledge, I will answer the questions that have been put to you. I will begin with the last question concerning the control of gravitational forces. The natural cosmic laws require a uniform and consistent development within the framework of all evolutionary concerns of all levels. This means that the spiritual as well as the material consciousness-based development constantly progress in harmony with each other and must always be in harmony with each other in accordance with the consistency of all things. In the case of the control of gravity, the rules of the laws are ordered in such manner that primarily the consciousness-based evolution is of decisive importance for the development of technological aids for the control of gravitational forces. Thus, as a rule, the application of the power of consciousness to paralyze the gravitational forces first leads to technological coping and only at a much later point in time, with the corresponding development of the power of consciousness, does the possibility occur through which a human being can move weightlessly through space. You call this state produced by the power of consciousness a levitative moment, which means nothing else than that a levitation process takes place. In other words, a levitation. At the beginning point, this state is evoked in an unconscious form to the human being, and only gradually does she learn to master it consciously and to purposefully steer it. Let me get that again. At the beginning point, this state is evoked in an unconscious form to the human being, and only gradually does she learn to master it consciously and to purposefully steer it. If the human being has learned to master these powers, only then will she be able to devise and construct highly technological aids. Sounds to me like you got to learn to levitate first before you can figure out how to get around gravity technically. Thus, the control of gravity at its primary and primary point is based first and foremost on the evolution of consciousness, which means that physically, the above-mentioned powers can only be mastered when the human life form has freed itself from the heaviness of unknowledge and non-consciousness-based matters. According to your linguistic usage, however, I must now explain. Exceptions confirm the rule, even if this exception is not easily recognizable and precedes in a form that does not appear very frequently. Such an exception is the earth human. She is not yet capable of mastering consciousness with all its consequences, and yet they are already capable of finding their way in the field of gravitational force research to a great extent. I'm going to read that again. She is not yet capable of mastering consciousness with all its consequences, and yet they are already capable of finding their way in the field of gravitational force research to a great extent. This exception rests in the confusing fact of a very rare erroneous development which has fundamentally shifted the potential of the rectification of consciousness and the material realm overall, whereby the material realm has become overpowering and dominates in relation to the evolution. This explains why the material realm has come to the fore and has become dominant in terrestrial human beings, whereby evolution takes place primarily in this direction, while the purely consciousness-based evolution lags behind at a disadvantage, as you yourself once said. This is why technology on Earth is far more developed than the evolution of the consciousness. It should be noted, however, that especially since 1937, the strong influences of the New Age have led this mismatch of the material realm throughout the world into much lighter and more moderate paths, whereby the difference between the prosperity of consciousness and pure materialness is no longer as great as is generally assumed. Many spiritual and consciousness-based directions have led to the attainment of great insights of enormous importance and great value, which are decisively reflected in the development of technology and, interestingly, lead to good success, although the normal course of compliance with the law is disturbed. This can be explained, however, by the fact that the new knowledge of consciousness gained elsewhere almost fully replaces the lawful rule, which means that the earth human, despite his or her barbarian nature, has progressed very much in every respect since 1937, and although often unconsciously and only caused by the cosmic vibrations, approaches the real evolution very rapidly and begins to fulfill it. The background of this development can already be determined with the first day of the breakthrough of the age of Aquarius, on the 3rd of February, 1844, and during the subsequent time up to the year 1937, since from the 3rd of February, the second half of the transitional period began to show its powerful effect, whereby it can be said with the greatest probability that the desired value of the earth human in relation to his or her determination of evolution will probably be reached at the earliest in a period of 800 years. Wow, we got 800 years to go. An attempt to reduce this to a shorter period of time, as you know, has unfortunately failed. But it would be unfair to claim that the earth human is largely to blame for this failure of the experiment, because in truth it is only those who were destined to spread the knowledge of the truth. Billy, you may have strayed from the actual topic, but I see certain connections in it. After that, it seems to me that we barbarians from Earth are not as bad as your speeches often said, right? You know, I myself feel very much at home in my barbarian skin, and for the time being, I do not want to have it any other way, although I would often have bad difficulties when I return from you to my world. So I can kind of see that. He doesn't want to leave his barbarism. We get adrenaline and motorcycles and hang gliders and all kinds of stuff. We get out there and we enjoy a certain amount of danger. We have fun. It seems to me, from what I've heard of the Plejaren home world, Erras, that it's not very exciting. Everybody is kind of put in a box, and I don't know. I would have to see. I can't make judgment on that. But I kind of like the excitement of the earth. I kind of like just going along and doing our thing, although I try to improve my consciousness. Semjase, I must admit that the impression of my words may often have been a little troubled, but a hard language is necessary to name the facts, because only through this hard language itself can the earth human become thoughtful. But I have answered the question. The answer should be sufficient. What was the other question? What was another question? Oh yes, jealousy. I have talked about that before. From the point of view mentioned above, however, it is worth further dissection. The material thinking of the earth human is indeed very decisive for the emotional and feeling life. The more the human being of earth got caught in material thinking in former times, the more they influenced their emotional life with greed. Thus, they gradually coupled their material thinking with the core of their feeling center, so that they inevitably became one feeling thought complex. Consequently, especially the feelings of hatred and love, which are generated by thinking and appear as feelings of the inner being, were impregnated by material values. Man, I love that motorcycle. It is so fast and it sounds so good. Oh, it's just awesome. Nobody's taking that from me. That kind of stuff, I guess. Which created themselves as greed of possession of both forms, namely into the greed of possession of love and into the greed of possession of hatred. In both forms, an ego-related greed for possession develops, which must inevitably lead to a third form of greed for possession, also produced by the human being himself, herself, namely the greed for possession of the love-hate. In all cases, a possessiveness appears, triggered by material thinking, which exacts a right to the possession of love or hate, and a right to the human to whom love or hate applies, whereby this right is again considered property. A little side note from me, as far as most of my side notes. You guys got to understand that I am reading this mostly for the first time, and I'm learning from it just like everybody else. So my mouth overruns my brain once in a while. Kind of bear with me if you would. We'll continue. The generating of jealous possession thinking depends exclusively on the form of the level of consciousness and on the emotions. It is universally uniform and thus not earthbound, whereby I would like to emphasize, however, that on Erra, These lower levels of consciousness no longer exist, and jealousy is no longer known to our people, or, as I better can explain, no longer pertains, because in earlier times our people also had to go through these stages. The more immaterial the human's thinking becomes, the more she distances himself from possession thinking, which is also called feeling thinking. So, the norm of liberation of every level of consciousness in relation to the jealous, as well as the material and other possessive thinking, is actually considered to be the yardstick of the evolutionary stage. So, until we get rid of these feelings, these whatever, we're not going to evolve. A completely anti-materialistic thinking, feeling-based and emotionally balanced and truly consciously developed human being is no longer able to generate jealousy in himself, herself, because his or her thinking has become all-embracing thinking, which in reverence regards all possessions as venerable and in love and joy, elevates them to the common good, but always in the sense that a venerable bond is given in observance of the laws and recommendations, and indeed from every side. So you can really like your motorcycle, but you gotta draw the line. You can't get overboard with it. Billy, a very good explanation, but how do you think about marriage? Is there then a right to the partner? Semjase, your question is very illogical. You know the laws and recommendations and know their values very well, so why do you ask? Billy, you do not want to treat me to anything? Of course I know, but I find that you could calmly give me an explanation for all those people who are not yet capable of this knowledge. Semjase, then your question is not illogical. Billy, I think so too. You were illogical because you asked without thinking, and that is exactly what you did, was it not? Your answer just came too fast. Semjase, I cannot hide anything from you? Billy, do you think that is right? Semjase, no, I want to answer. If two people join together to form a marriage bond, this does not mean a taking possession of the partner, but simply that they join together in a bond. So, there are no rights of ownership, but only love, understanding, and joy in the pleasure of each other. Each partner remains completely free in his or her own actions and in allowing the laws and recommendations to be fulfilled, while in purely conjugal actions and letting things be, as in decisions, etc., one acts in mutual agreement with all interests. In the fulfillment of the laws and recommendations, in an evolutive sense, and in every respect concerning this, mutual clarifications and agreements are necessary, which is given by certain rules of order. Billy, well said, but how many human beings understand this in our world of barbarians? Let us not do that. It is still too early to discuss these things. Better answer the questions. Better answer the other questions. Semjase, as you like. I, like my people, are human beings like the earth humans. We also have feelings and fine spiritual perceptions such as love, friendship, sympathies, and antipathies, just as they are also characteristic of you earth humans. In certain respects, however, they are much finer than with you, more sensitive and more profound. Over the past centuries, this has led us to exercise too much control over them and to learn to encapsulate our feelings. We assumed that we had to do this to protect ourselves from those more advanced. This is because in the course of the evolution, all fine spiritual perceptions and feelings refine and therefore require more intensive control in the higher realms. This intensification expands in the same measure as the entire concomitant material development and proves everything worthy that can be grasped. Thus, also the love and the desire to be together with others of equal evolution become more and more pronounced, but also the less developed are considered equally because simply the desire for them inexorably occurs. So these feelings are not replaced by knowledge and intellectual activity, but result from them. These feelings can only be created and brought to bear through knowledge and the activity of the intellect. Therefore, it is also not the case that certain tasks cause a change in the feeling realm, because since these are highly developed and controlled, they cannot be classified as changes other than those of further evolution. However, this is different with the earth human, whose development in these areas is still rather low, and why she can be influenced by fields of activity, after which, e.g., with a prison guard, aggressive changes of feeling appear. We made the mistake of controlling our feelings too much, which meant that we made analysis according to pure probability values. This was wrong, which we realized very soon after your acquaintance, you who often let yourself be guided only by your feelings. This showed that it was wrong to encapsulate our feelings from more profound developed intelligences through an all too tight control, which is why this damage was repaired in the course of the last year. It was already clear from this that the blocking of the feelings expanded and began to have an effect in one's own ranks. So we found our way back through you in time and were able to correct the evil in a few months, before an evolutionary blockage of feelings would have certainly appeared, as is the case with other peoples. Billy, you mean with those who belong to your cosmic federation? She's talking about the Vulcans, maybe. Sorry. Semjase, no, that is not the case. These phenomena do not exist among our peoples and races. The people of Erras are the most developed in the Federation and are therefore the most advanced in these matters. A comprehensive council decision has averted the evil, whereby attention will be paid in the future also to the fact that still more lower developed peoples and races do not make the same mistake. I therefore speak of foreign races and peoples foreign to us in the vast universe. Billy, aha. And what about the question here about passion, etc.? Semjase, depending on the state of evolution of the consciousness, these concerns also change, because as a rule, passions, sobriety, and coolness are based on the consciousness-based level of evolution, since they are special character traits of a certain development. So, also among our peoples and races, there are enormous differences in this respect, as it is also the case on the earth. In this respect, the Errans are also ever fundamentally different among themselves, because passions and similar phenomena also diminish with the dissolution of the physical body. Only that exactly these become more and more refined depending on the higher development of the consciousness realm. As long as it is still present, however, as well as the physical body still exists. With us, however, the passions are no longer to be found in the form in which they are still deeply and wildly anchored in you earth humans. Now I'll read that again. With us, however, the passions are no longer to be found in the form in which they are still deeply and wildly anchored in you earth humans. Billy, that is to be understood. We are still the barbarians, after all. But after your statement, I would now like to conclude that on average, you Errans are still quite the same in your emotions as we barbarians, even if everything is refined and sensitized in you, right? Semjase, certainly. It corresponds to the words you say. But that does not mean, as Martin asks, that our task, or even my task, will be affected if I acknowledge this. What is correct is that through the discussion and explanation of these things, more understanding is created for the fact that we Errans are human beings like their terrestrial counterparts. Billy, you said that well. Then, well, this question here still. Oh no, you answered it earlier in another context. Then we have this question for now. Here, look, now. Here now, look, that is also for you, of course, with kind regards. You also have something from Herbert there. Semjase, I will discuss it with you later. Billy, okay. Now I forgot something after all. Something from Guido. I will bring it next time. Semjase, is it a gift again? Billy, no. Semjase, you should not bring any more gifts. I would have to reject them. I just want to make an exception with this bear here. She likes her teddy bear. Billy, okay, I get it. Semjase, that is good. And now let me explain something to you. Everything in you is still resisting the security measures spoken by your friends. You should follow them. Everyone is very troubled and concerned about you, and rightly so, as you will soon see when I explain the facts to you. For my part, I would like to thank all your friends, through you, for their great help and understanding. Especially Olga. I would like to express the feelings of my thanks because she has made a great effort for your safety. Through her initiative, these steps are finally taken, which have been necessary for a long time. I could see that during the last week, but especially at the weekend. But thanks are also due to all the others who are very understanding and very anxious. But now listen. Father has clarified the concerns about the mysterious events of the last months, because among other things they tried to kill you 3 times. The attacks themselves lead back to 2 different groups with completely different interests. The first attack was carried out by elements of a secret Israeli Christian religious command. In parentheses, Israeli-Christian means that these are Christian forces in the Israeli state, end parentheses. The reason for this lies in the spread of the Talmud Emmanuel, whose first finder and translator, Isa Rashid, was found and killed by the same elements in Baghdad in March of this year. There is still a danger for you that this command will track you down in secret and try to carry out its will. So be very attentive and extremely careful. They have already once destroyed the truth, if it took thousands of years before it can now be brought anew. The worldly greed for might of the sects and religions is boundless, which is why every means will do for them to realize it. But you represent a danger to them because your spreading of the truth in general, and especially about them, especially through the Talmud, very much endangers their belief and domineering plans. Beware, therefore, of the secretly burrowing religious ones. The 2 other attacks were carried out by a Nazi group that had settled in Brazil after the end of the war. They robbed German and Canadian plans for the construction of flying discs, with which they are able to fly almost effortlessly into the earthly space today. They also came into possession of a foreign spacecraft of a human race from a distant galaxy. The interstellar drive, however, was destroyed beyond recognition, so they could only use the anti-gravity drive for planetary flight. With this ship, which offered them many possibilities, they also tracked you. It was the same ship that you recently tracked down in Winkelried, near Wetzikon, but which had landed there weeks before when you found the mysterious tracks. The crew of the ship that had used the flying apparatus to fly to the Earth is dead. They all died after their breathing apparatus became empty and could not be refilled. So they weren't oxygen breathers, I guess. They were breathing something else. They were poison gas respirators, a gas that is still unknown on the Earth. Over time, their ship in the hands of the Nazis could have had dire consequences for the Earth humans, which is why we were forced to destroy it completely when they left it unattended for a few moments. These, dear friend, are the facts that have emerged from our research. Beware of these Nazists, or neo-Nazis as you call them, because they too fear for their existence through you. Always think about being wary and about the fact that the enemy is also in Germany, especially in those circles that openly work against you. Billy, that is nice news. Semjase, in an old prophecy, it is written that around the world an evil enmity will be built up against you. Consider these words, for they are of great importance. The truth is to be destroyed by all means by might-hungry and greedy ones, who often unconsciously use dubious and misleading elements such as Bertossi, Jacob, and Erras, among many others, and make them allies. Billy, you said that before. Okay, I will be careful. But let us stop now, because I have another question. Before the landing of the Mars probes, you said that if the devices worked, they would find primitive life on Mars. Well, the first probe failed completely, but the second, as Svath once said, might make a fantastic observation, that it might detect exotic life. It means that a process of life takes place there that is completely foreign to earthly scientists. Askett and Svath once explained to me that a special kind of bacterial life ate up certain microorganic life. Is that true? Semjase, certainly, that is so. Biological life, in your sense, does not exist on Mars because it would be consumed by negative influences. But on this planet, as I said before, there are microorganic life forms, which, however, earthly science is not yet able to prove. Billy, I would like to know more about it. Semjase, for you alone I may enlighten you, but not yet at the present time, because a signal call just came that I have to go back to the station. And let's see, there's looks like addresses for Mr. Michael Erras. Subject your documentary, Edward Meyer, Prophet of the New Time. Okay. This is a letter. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a letter to Mr. Erras. Dear Mr. Erras, your above-mentioned documentation was sent to me. As a connoisseur of the Semjase reports and the Talmud Emmanuel, as well as a scientifically educated person, quote in parentheses, chemistry and physics, comma, ETH, Zurich. That must be the college that he went to, in parentheses. I have read the 4 parts of your explanations very thoroughly. The fact that extraterrestrial intelligences manifest themselves and send us messages, but that on the other hand, a lot of fraud has already been perpetrated with such contacts, is in my opinion important enough to objectively examine everything connected with it. This attitude prompts me to write to you, especially since you ask at the end whether there are other interpretations available than that Mr. Meyer is either a fraudster or a deceived person. The importance of the matter also requires that you declare this letter as an open letter and send a photocopy of it to the Frey Intergress. Anyway, I'm sorry. He wants to publish. He needs this letter published. UFO societies and whatever. Anyway, you call your remarks a documentation, which surely means that you, dear Mr. Erras, want to arrive at a factual, logically and analytically constructed opinion in it. Unfortunately, it seems to me that you have not succeeded in this, neither in some astronomical and physical considerations, nor with regard to the Talmud Emmanuel and the other material presented by Mr. Meyer. In the following, I will prove this with various examples, which are taken from all 4 parts of your documentation. First part, origin of Venus and Moon. You cite the Bode Titius rule as proof that Venus, in parentheses, contrary to Semjase's statement, must have formed at its present location during the formation of the solar system because it fits into this rule in terms of size and distance from the Sun. However, I may point out that other orbits of our solar system, where, according to Bode Titius, a planet should actually belong, are not occupied by such a planet. This could also have originally been the case for the orbit of Venus. However, such a free place has a similar effect as a free valence in an atom. It seeks to saturate itself. If a foreign world body enters such an incomplete system, then it must swing into one of these free orbits, namely where it fits in according to its mass, gravitational law, in quotes in parentheses. Certainly, this does not disprove the possibility that Venus could have already formed when our system was formed, but just as little does it disprove the BT rule that Venus could have entered our solar system from outside at a later date. By the way, there is another theory, namely that Venus could have separated from Jupiter and later swung into its present orbit. In any case, a flyby of Venus by Earth not too long ago would explain various major catastrophes on Earth very well. Second part, summary. About the ideological explanations in this part of your documentation, one can have different opinions depending on one's attitude. It is also not quoted in detail anywhere, and the Semjase reports do not give any concepts that can be directly transferred into the earthly thinking, parentheses, which I will come back to in another place, end parentheses. But if you recommend, as a conclusion, not to get involved with these extraterrestrials because they want to conquer the Earth, then this is deliberate misleading. For you two must have read again and again in the reports that Semjase and the Pleiadians primarily have a mission to fulfill in the spiritual realm, that they do not interfere forcibly with the decisions of human beings and are not allowed to impose any development on us. Dozens of passages can be cited for this, so here I certainly miss the objectivity necessary for a documentary. It sounds more like a personal controversy, into which the last part of the summary unfortunately also ends. Third part, space technology. You deal with the terms photon propulsion, up to the speed of light, and tachyon propulsion, faster than light, which are said to develop insufficient thrust according to the recoil principle, and claim that extraterrestrial spaceships are propelled by gravitational fields. This is quite a confusion of terms, which would require an in-depth physics treatise to clarify. Here is a simplification that is also understandable to the layman. Professor B. Heim, director of the Institute for Force Field Physics and General Cosmology in Northeim, developed a comprehensive theory which allows all spatiotemporal structures to be described. Through this mathematical theory, it is possible, among other things, to link fields and quanta, in parentheses matter, with each other, and to establish a generally valid force field theory through an extension of Einstein's approaches. This leads to a mesofield, which causes a dynamic interaction, e.g. between a gravitational field component and a matter field component. This results in a dualistic conception of the mesofield, which Heim calls the contrabaric and dynabaric state. In the contrabaric field state, electromagnetic radiation energy can be converted into gravitational acceleration. To cut a long story short, if a spacecraft has built up a contrabaric field that overcompensates for the earthly gravitational field, then photons, which also represent electromagnetic radiant energy, can very well cause propulsion up to the speed of light within a relatively short time. he's talking about Einstein. Well, Einstein and several of these others were influenced by the play Aaron, and they fessed up to it. Anyway, the same section and traveling with UELG quotes. Your assumption that spaceships could also travel near the Earth, in parentheses, you even say in the Earth's atmosphere, end parentheses, at the speed of light or faster than light because they suddenly could no longer be found, is a rather peculiar reasoning. Assume that a spaceship only flew with a speed of 30,000 kilometers per second. Even then, it would have disappeared from sight in a fraction of a second, only at 1/10 of the speed of light. So we don't even need to bother with the speed of light to explain the suddenness of the disappearance. As far as the speed of superluminescence is concerned, it is precisely the extended theory of relativity from which you wanted to pull the wool over Mr. Meyer's eyes that postulates the hyperspace in which, according to Professor Feinberg, the tachyons are to be sought. According to the language of quantum theory, this hyperspace can be defined as the propagation space of antiparticles. The fact that the possibility of time travel arises quasi as a, quote, byproduct gives me a little schadenfreude, whatever, which you will please forgive me, dear Mr. Ahrens. Part 4. A proof. You want to prove that a letter important for the authenticity of the Talmud Emmanuel is a clumsy forgery because, 1. The typewriter type is identical to the typewriter used by Meyer. As proof, you use the fact that the large umlauts and the SZ are missing. Yes, but dear Mr. Ahrens, that is the case with almost all typewriters in the world, except the German machines. Even on my IBM machine, I have to write AE or UE and DAS, and I don't hope that this will prove to you that Mr. Meyer wrote this letter. Due to this faux pas, points 2 and 3 of the proof are, of course, also strongly devalued, although these would in themselves be more debatable. But still, no space after comma and full stop and grammatical inconsistencies by someone whose mother tongue is obviously not German do not necessarily prove identity with someone who also does not master the German language without errors. Final remark. Here, you finally mention, albeit only in passing, the evidence of Mr. Meyer's contacts, which should have been at the top of every unbiased person's list of considerations, namely the photo and film material. You dismiss this with the expression, "Let others deal with it." Yes, indeed, a great many have already looked into it and have clearly recognized it as genuine. Even people who otherwise condemn Mr. Meyer's manner have admitted this. Or also the magazine Esoterra, in its otherwise ridiculous essay of October 76. But if these recordings, which really occupy a special position in the UFO documentation, are genuine, then E.M. must also have had many contacts of a personal nature with the crews of the beam ships, because otherwise such obviously coordinated recordings would not have been possible. Certainly, there is a lot of inconsistency and incomprehensibility in the Semjase reports. But imagine you landed on a distant planet and had to communicate with its inhabitants, whose mentality and way of thinking you did not know at all. Wouldn't those human beings then also often have to hear contradictions in your statements? Even if, or perhaps precisely because, the two technical and spiritual levels of development are very different. This is not objectively provable, but my personal opinion, which I did not want to withhold from you at the end. With kind regards, and this is signed I'm not really sure. It looks like Martin Sorhe, but I forget. Anyway, so I will give you clarification on that when I have enough time. That was Semjase. Billy, well, are you in a hurry? Semjase, one more question or two I can answer for you. After that is just time for the other one. Billy, thank you. You know, Mercury still gives me a problem. I only came across it again the day before yesterday when we flew around this lump last year. You told me that it was still contracting. Why is this happening? Semjase, the metal core of the planet has such a large specific mass that the outer skin, i.e., the outer layers, constantly contract inwards, making the outer layers extremely compact. Billy, oh yes, you already explained that once. Semjase, sure, but now I have something very important to explain to you. Many of the photos taken by you and me in the middle of last year have now found an extremely unworthy aspect. Since then, various pictures you have circulated have been falsified or evaluated in a manner that is probably quite positive but also pertinent. Some photos have been used to depict the Earth's future interests in a form that is quite monstrous. Your and my pictures were partly faithfully taken up in order to make research and future demonstration drawings, whereby now the danger exists that you are or will be accused of cheating. In the meantime, there are drawings in deceptive form of the Jupiter pictures and the pictures of the universe barrier, which were faithfully made according to your widespread pictures as drawings. In this respect, people will not consider that our pictures existed much earlier than these drawings were made. So far, the Earth humans do not yet know how to think. This has been proven with the pictures of Venus and Mars. Billy, oh dear, another one of those things? But what should I do about it? Semjase, the unreasonableness of the Earth human will leave you no possibility of defense, for the real facts will not be recognized by reason. Unreal scientists, as well as film and photo forgers and draftsmen, will be believed sooner than you, who will be depicted as a fantasist. You will experience this already tomorrow when you get copies of our pictures put into your hands. Billy, good grief, has it really come to that? Semjase, certainly, you should not try to defend yourself first. Shroud yourself in silence, for every attempt would be pointless. The Earth human favors thinking and acting along other paths than those of the truth. But something else. Often you are reproached that my and other messages are written very much according to your own writing style. Explain to the honestly interested person in this regard that this is a consequence of the transmission, since you must dress every picture symbol recording in word values and thus automatically express it in your manner of speaking and writing. So they're talking about how all the contact reports sounds like it's all Billy. But these contact reports are recorded on Semjase's ship and then retransmitted back to Billy as images. And he has to interpret these images and put them down into writing. He was trained from age 5 how to interpret these images. That was part of his training by Svath. Anyway, furthermore, I have to inform you that recently more and more extraterrestrial intelligences are sending robot and android manned ships to the Earth in order to be expeditionally active here. This has been the case for many years now, but this activity is currently being greatly increased, and Earth humans are often used as experimental and test objects. So be on your guard, because they could harm you if you fall into their hands unexpectedly. Billy, good. It seems to me that what you say is important, but again, not so much that I could forget another question. May I still ask it? Semjase, there is not enough time because I still have other things to discuss with you. Billy, it is just a question about Carlo Dish. Did he have any knowledge about Eloah? Semjase, I will have to clarify that first. I will report it to you tomorrow. Billy. Okay, then this is where the contact report ends. Semjase. Sure. But still, I would like to send my best regards to all of you and thank you for your love and effort. So, that's the end of Contact Report 66. That was kind of a long one, and I got to admit, a lot of it went over my head. But it is here, and we can come back to it later if we get wiser, or if I get wiser, I can come back and sort it out. I think I got some of it. I got the gist of it. But, I'm learning, same as you guys. I'm trying to sort this out, and sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. So anyway, thanks for hanging. Like I said, that was Contact Report 66, and I'll see you on number 67. Have a great day. See you. Bye.